The mining laser cut through the asteroid's crystalline surface, like a scalpel through flesh, sending rainbow fragments spinning into the void. Rex Thompson adjusted his welding mask and guided the industrial cutter with practiced precision, his suit's gyroscopes keeping him steady against the rock face. 15 years of deep space mining had taught him to read stone like others read books. This particular asteroid was pregnant with rare earth metals, the kind that made colony ships possible. "Rex, you getting anything good out there?" Crackled Maria's voice through the comm, static washing over her words from the solar storm brewing 3 systems over. "Oh yeah," Rex grunted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the suit's climate control. "This baby's loaded with palladium veins. Gonna make us rich enough to retire to one of those fancy orbital stations." He fired up the plasma torch again, its blue-white flame casting dancing shadows across the asteroid's pocked surface. The Salvage King, his modified mining vessel, hung in space behind him like a metal spider, its cargo bay already half full with precious ore. Rex had found this particular rock drifting in the outer rim, uncharted and unclaimed. In the mining business, that was like finding buried treasure. The torch bit deeper into the stone, and Rex frowned. Something was wrong. The mineral composition was shifting, becoming more complex. Crystalline structures that shouldn't exist were emerging from the cut, their faceted surfaces seeming to pulse with an inner light. "What the hell?" he muttered, pulling back the torch and examining his readings. The scanner was going haywire, showing energy signatures that made no sense. Organic compounds mixed with exotic metals, temperature fluctuations that defied physics. Then he heard a sound that made his blood freeze in his veins. A cry, weak, muffled by layers of stone, but unmistakably alive. Rex killed the torch and pressed his helmet against the asteroid's surface, his enhanced audio sensors straining to pick up the sound again. There a keening wail that seemed to vibrate through the rock itself. Something was trapped inside this chunk of space debris, something that had been calling out into the void for God knew how long. "Maria, I'm going to need the heavy excavator," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "And prep the medical bay." "Medical bay? Rex, what's going on out there?" "Not sure yet, but I think we got ourselves a survivor." The next 3 hours were a delicate dance between speed and precision. Rex worked with tools designed to crack asteroids open like nuts, but now he wielded them like surgical instruments. Each cut was calculated, each blast charge measured to the gram. The crying grew stronger as he worked deeper, taking on harmonics that seemed almost musical, if music could sound desperate and afraid. When he finally broke through the last layer of stone, Rex's headlamp illuminated something that made him question his sanity. A creature no bigger than a house cat lay curled in a crystalline hollow, its body covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and silver, depending on the light. It had 4 legs, delicate wings folded against its back, and a serpentine neck that curved protectively around what looked like broken pieces of similar crystalline structures, eggshells. Rex realized with a shock. The creature lifted its head at the sudden light, and Rex found himself staring into eyes like molten gold, ancient and intelligent and filled with pain that went beyond the physical. Blood or something like it seeped from scratches along its hide, and one wing hung at an awkward angle. "Holy shit," Rex breathed. "You're a dragon." The dragon tilted its head at the sound of his voice, and Rex could have sworn he saw recognition flicker in those impossible eyes. It tried to lift itself, failed, and let out another of those heart-wrenching cries. Rex had seen a lot of strange things in his years working the outer rim. Crystalline formations that grew like plants, gas clouds that seemed to watch you pass, derelict ships from civilizations that had been dust for millennia. But this was something else entirely. The dragon was dying. Rex could see it in the way its breathing came in shallow gasps, in the dim flicker of its scales. Whatever had brought it here, whatever catastrophe had embedded it in this asteroid, it had been alone for too long. "Easy there, little one," Rex said softly, extending one gloved hand toward the creature. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The dragon flinched back at first, then seemed to consider him with those ancient eyes. Slowly, cautiously, it stretched its neck forward until its nose touched Rex's glove. The contact sent a jolt through him, not electrical, but something deeper. For a moment, he could have sworn he felt the creature's emotions. Pain, loneliness, hope, and underneath it all, a desperate need to survive. "Yeah," Rex said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're coming with me?" Getting the dragon aboard the Salvage King required more creativity than Rex had used in 15 years of jury-rigging broken equipment. The creature was too weak to fly, too injured to move much on its own, and too alien for any of his emergency medical protocols. But Rex Thompson hadn't survived the Outer Rim by giving up when things got complicated. "Maria, I need you to clear out Storage Bay 3 and set up a clean environment," he said, carefully cradling the dragon against his chest as he maneuvered back toward the ship. The creature was surprisingly warm, and he could feel its rapid heartbeat through his suit's tactile sensors. "Rex, you still haven't told me what you found out there." "Something that's going to change everything," he replied, guiding his suit through the ship's airlock. "And I mean everything." The dragon whimpered as they transitioned from zero-G to the ship's artificial gravity, and Rex quickly adjusted his grip to support its injured wing. He'd dealt with wounded animals before growing up on a frontier colony, taught you that sometimes survival meant caring for creatures that couldn't care for themselves. But this was different. Every instinct told him this wasn't just an animal dot in Storage Bay 3. Rex had rigged up what he hoped would pass for a medical station. Clean blankets, a heat lamp borrowed from the hydroponics bay, water, and a selection of nutrient pastes that might be safe for alien physiology. The dragon's eyes tracked his every movement as he set up the makeshift sanctuary, intelligent and wary. "All right, little one," Rex said, removing his helmet and setting it aside. "Let's see what we're working with." The dragon allowed him to examine its injuries with a patience that seemed almost human. The wing was definitely broken. Rex could see where the delicate bone structure had snapped during whatever trauma had trapped it in the asteroid. There were lacerations along its hide, some infected, others showing signs of partial healing. But it was the creature's eyes that worried him most. They held a depth of sadness that spoke of losses beyond the physical. Rex had learned basic xenobiology during his mining certification. You never knew what kind of life you might encounter in the deep void. Most of it was microscopic, some of it was hostile, but all of it followed certain biological rules. This dragon, however, seemed to exist outside those rules. Its scales were part organic tissue, part crystalline structure. Its blood, when Rex carefully cleaned the wounds, had a luminescent quality that reminded him of the asteroid's strange glow. "Where did you come from?" he wondered aloud, carefully wrapping the creature's wing with medical tape. The dragon watched him work, occasionally making soft sounds that seemed almost conversational. As if in response to his question, the dragon lifted its head and released a series of melodic tones unlike anything Rex had ever heard. The sounds seemed to paint pictures in his mind, vast expanses of space, worlds covered in crystalline cities, others of its kind soaring between the stars. Then the melody turned dark, filled with discord and pain. Fire, destruction, the cold, silence of space. "Your people," Rex said quietly. "Something happened to your people." The dragon's song trailed off into silence, but its eyes never left Rex's face. There was something it was trying to communicate, something important. Rex found himself reaching out to stroke the creature's neck, and again he felt that strange connection, emotions that weren't his own flooding through his. Consciousness. Loss. But also hope. Trust. The dragon was placing its faith in him, this strange creature who had pulled it from the void. "I don't know what you are," Rex said softly, "but I promise you this, you're not alone anymore." The dragon settled against the blankets with what sounded like a sigh of contentment, its scales shifting to a warmer purple hue. For the first time since Rex had found it, the creature's breathing seemed steady, peaceful. "Rex?" Maria's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're getting some strange readings from Storage Bay 3. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases." Rex looked down at the dragon, which had begun to emit a soft, warm glow from its scales. "I know, Maria, we're going to need to make some modifications to our flight plan." "What kind of modifications?" Rex watched the dragon's eyes drift closed, its breathing deepening into what he hoped was natural sleep, the kind that might just save an entire species. 3 days into their journey back toward civilized space, Rex had established something resembling a routine with his unexpected passenger. The dragon he'd started calling it Spark, after the way its scales flickered with inner light, had shown remarkable intelligence and an even more remarkable capacity for trust. Spark had learned to recognize the sound of Rex's footsteps always, lifting its head expectantly when he entered the storage bay. The broken wing was healing faster than should have been possible, the crystalline elements in its scales seeming to accelerate the process. But it was the creature's behavior that convinced Rex he was dealing with something far more than an animal. "Morning, Spark," Rex said, carrying a tray of various foods he'd prepared. Over the past few days, he discovered that the dragon preferred the high-energy protein pastes, but also showed an unusual interest in the mineral supplements Rex used to maintain the ship's hydroponic systems. Spark chirped in response, a sound Rex had come to associate with contentment, and carefully accepted a piece of the protein bar from his hand. The dragon's table manners were impeccable, never grabbing or showing aggression around food. More than that, it seemed to understand the concept of rationing, never taking more than its share, even when clearly still hungry. "You know," Rex said, settling down beside the creature, "I've been thinking about what you showed me. Those visions, or memories, or whatever they were. Your people, they weren't just traveling through space, were they? They were fleeing something." Spark's scales shifted to a darker hue, and it made a low sound that somehow conveyed sadness without need for translation. The dragon looked up at Rex with those ancient gold eyes, and again the visions came. But this time they were clearer, more detailed. Rex saw worlds covered in structures that seemed grown rather than built, their surfaces gleaming with the same crystalline material as Spark's scales. He saw dragons, dozens of them, soaring between floating cities, their songs creating visible patterns in the air that seemed to guide the very architecture around them. Then came the darkness, a force that consumed light itself, turning those beautiful worlds into husks of dead stone. The dragons fleeing not as refugees, but as the last guardians of something precious. And in the final moments of the vision, Rex saw what they were: protecting eggs, hundreds of them, embedded in asteroids and sent spinning into the void, each one carrying the hope of their species' survival. Rex jerked back to awareness, his heart pounding. "You're not just a survivor," he whispered. "You're a guardian. And those other asteroids... Spark nodded, actually nodded, like it understood every word, and began to sing. This time the melody was different, urgent, and complex. Rex felt his ship's sensors responding to the sound, picking up signals he'd never noticed before. Faint energy signatures scattered across the sector, each one matching the resonance patterns he'd first detected in Spark's asteroid. "There are others," Rex breathed. "Other survivors." The dragon's song grew stronger, and Rex realized it wasn't just communicating, it was calling out, sending a signal across the void to any others of its kind who might be listening. The ship's long-range sensors began picking up responses. Faint but unmistakable. Spark's entire body lit up with excitement, scales shimmering like a living aurora. "Maria," Rex called over the intercom. "I need you to plot courses to these coordinates." He transmitted the sensor data, his hands shaking with the magnitude of what they'd discovered. "Rex, these readings. Some of these signatures are coming from inhabited systems. If what you found is on worlds with established colonies, then we've got a problem," Rex finished. The implications hit him like a meteor to the gut. If other dragon eggs were embedded in asteroids throughout the sector, and if those asteroids had been mined or claimed by human colonies, then Sparks. People weren't just scattered, they were trapped. Sparks seemed to sense his distress. The dragon pressed against his leg, purring softly, and Rex felt a wave of comfort that wasn't his own. Despite everything it had lost, despite being alone in the void for who knew how long, the creature was trying to comfort him. "You're worried." "About them," Rex said. "Your people, the other survivors." Spark's response was immediate and complex, a symphony of emotions and images that told a story of desperate hope. Each egg was precious, irreplaceable. The dragons hadn't just scattered to survive. They'd sacrificed themselves to ensure their young had a chance at life. And now those young were trapped, waiting for someone to find them. Someone like Rex. "All right, little one," Rex said, his voice firm with resolve. "Looks like we're not going home just yet. We've got some eggs to collect." Sparks. Scales blazed with sudden brilliance, and its song took on harmonies that made the ship's hull ring like a bell. For the first time since Rex had found it, the dragon looked truly alive, not just surviving, but filled with purpose. They had work to do. The mining station, orbiting Kepler 442b, was supposed to be a routine stop, refuel, resupply, and quietly investigate the energy signature Rex's sensors had detected in the system. What he found instead was a black market that made his blood boil. "Welcome to Prosperity Station," the docking controller's voice crackled through the comm. "Please state your business and duration of stay." "Rex Thompson, Captain of the Salvage King," Rex replied, keeping his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. "Looking to trade some rare specimens." It had taken him 3 days to track down the source of the dragon egg signal in this system. 3 days of following sensor ghosts and energy traces, while Spark grew increasingly agitated. The little dragon, somehow sensing they were close to one of its kind. When Rex finally pinpointed the signature, it wasn't coming from an asteroid or a mining claim dot. It was coming from the station's exotic pets section. Prosperity Station was one of those gray area operations that thrived in the outer systems, technically legal, practically lawless. Miners came here to sell things they couldn't move through legitimate channels, and wealthy collectors came to buy things that would never make it past core world customs. Rex had visited places like this before, usually to fence salvage that was too hot for regular markets. He'd never expected to find a dragon here. "Spark, you need to stay hidden," Rex said softly as he prepared to disembark. The dragon had grown considerably over the past few weeks, now the size of a medium dog, but it could still curl up small enough to fit in a cargo container. "I know you can sense your sibling, but we can't let anyone see you yet," Spark chirped. Unhappily but settled into the modified shipping crate Rex had prepared, its scales dimming to almost black. The dragon had learned to control its bioluminescence, another sign of its remarkable intelligence. Prosperity Station's main corridor was an assault on the sense's neon advertisements in a dozen languages, the smell of exotic foods and industrial chemicals, and the constant background noise of 1,000 species trying to make a deal. Rex navigated through the chaos with practiced ease, following his scanner toward the source of the energy signature. The exotic emporium was exactly what Rex had expected: a high-end shop catering to wealthy collectors with more money than sense. crystal cases displayed everything from rare minerals to preserved alien specimens, each one tagged with a price that could buy a small starship. And there, in a climate-controlled case in the back corner, was what Rex had come for, the dragon. Egg was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. About the size of a human head, its crystalline shell pulsed with the same inner light as Spark's scales. But where Spark radiated warmth and life, this egg felt cold, its glow flickering, weakly like a dying star. Magnificent, isn't it? The shop owner, a centaurian with too many arms and too much jewelry, had materialized beside Rex without a sound. Found it embedded in an asteroid near the Helix Nebula, completely unique specimen. The crystalline matrix alone is worth a fortune, but the organic components, absolutely priceless. What is it? Rex asked, though he already knew the answer. Unknown species, the centaurian replied, his multiple eyes gleaming with avarice. Possibly the last of its kind. I've had xenobiologists from 3 systems examine it, and none of them can classify it. The energy readings are off the charts, and the internal structure suggests something far more complex than a simple egg. Rex felt his jaw clench. It's for sale? For the right price. 50,000 credits, non-negotiable. A collector on Titan Prime has been very interested, but I'm always open to competing offers. 50,000 credits. Rex's entire life savings, plus the value of his ship. And from the looks of the egg, even if he could afford it, he might already be too late. The glow was fading, the life inside weakening with each passing moment. I'll need to think about it, Rex said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Of course, the Centaurian replied, but don't think too long. Unique specimens like this don't stay on the market forever. Rex left the shop with his heart pounding and his mind racing. 50,000 credits was impossible, but he couldn't just walk away. That egg contained one of Spark's siblings, possibly the only other survivor in this system. There had to be another way. Back on his ship, Spark emerged from its hiding place immediately, scales blazing with agitation. The dragon had sensed its sibling, and the distress was written in every line of its body. I know, Rex said softly, kneeling beside the creature. I know you can feel them, but the situation is ... complicated. Spark's response was immediate and intense, a barrage of emotions and images that left Rex reeling. The dragon showed him what it was feeling, the presence of its sibling like a dying flame, growing weaker by the hour. The egg wasn't just being kept in storage, it was slowly dying, cut off from the cosmic energies it needed to survive. They don't know what they have, Rex realized. They think it's just a curiosity, but it's alive. It's dying. Spark sang then, a song of such desperate longing that it made Rex's chest ache. The dragon was calling to its sibling, trying to share its own life force across the distance. And for a moment, Rex's scanners picked up a response, a weak pulse, from the direction of the station, as if the egg had heard and was trying to answer. Rex closed his eyes and made a decision that would change everything. All right, Spark, he said, his voice grim with determination. We're going to save your sibling, but we're not going to buy it. Spark tilted its head, and Rex could feel the dragon's confusion. We're going to steal it, planning a theft on prosperity. Station required the kind of creative thinking that had kept Rex alive in the mining business for 15 years. The exotic emporium was located in the station's high-security commercial district, protected by both automated systems and private security. Getting in would be hard enough. Getting out with a dragon egg while avoiding system-wide alarms would be nearly impossible. But Rex had advantages the station's security hadn't planned for. The ventilation system connects to the mining equipment maintenance tunnels, he explained. To Spark, spreading blueprints across his ship's table. I can get in through there, but I'll need to disable the security systems first. That's where you come in. Spark studied the blueprints with an intensity that still amazed Rex. The dragon had learned to read human technical diagrams within days, its intelligence adapting to new information with frightening speed. The station runs on a fusion power grid, Rex continued. If we can cause a temporary overload in the commercial sector, the security systems will switch to backup power. That gives us maybe 10 minutes before they come back online. Spark chirped questioningly and tapped one of its claws on the power distribution diagram. You want to know how we cause the overload? Rex grinned. That's the beautiful part. Your scales emit energy in the same frequency range as the station's power grid. If you can modulate that emission, create a resonance cascade, the dragon's eyes widened with understanding, and it began to sing softly. The ship's lights flickered in response, dimming and brightening in perfect rhythm with Spark's melody. Exactly, Rex said. You're not just a dragon, you're a living EMP generator. But we'll need to time it perfectly. They spent the next several hours rehearsing the plan. Rex would make his way through the maintenance tunnels to the exotic emporium, while Spark positioned itself near the station's power coupling. When Rex gave the signal, Spark would sing its disruptive frequency, causing a cascading power failure that would black out the commercial sector for exactly 9 minutes and 37 seconds, long enough for Rex to grab the egg and get out. Not long enough to trigger the station's emergency protocols. At least, that was the theory. Remember, Rex told Spark as they prepared to execute the plan. Wait for my signal. If we do this too early or too late, we're both going to end up in a station jail cell. Spark nuzzled his hand affectionately, then slipped away into the shadows of the docking bay. Despite its size, the dragon moved with a silence that would have impressed a professional thief. Rex made his way to the maintenance access with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. 15 years of working in industrial environments had taught him that most people ignored maintenance workers, and his mining gear was generic enough to pass casual inspection. The tunnels were exactly as claustrophobic as he'd expected, barely wide enough for a human to crawl through. But they were also unmonitored Prosperity Station security focused on the public areas, not the mechanical spaces that kept the station running. It took him 20 minutes to reach the junction that led to the exotic emporium. Through the ventilation grate, he could see the shop's interior, still brightly lit and apparently doing good business, even at this late hour. The dragon egg sat in its climate-controlled case, its glow noticeably dimmer than it had been that morning. Rex activated his comlink. Spark, you in position? The response came not as words, but as a warm feeling of readiness that flowed through. Their strange connection. All right, little one. On my mark. Now. Spark's song began immediately, a complex harmony that seemed to resonate through the station's superstructure. Rex watched through the grate as the shop's lights began to flicker, the climate control system stuttering as power fluctuations rippled through the grid. Then everything went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in almost immediately, but it was dim and focused on the major corridors. The exotic emporium was plunged into near-total darkness, its security systems offline. Rex kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped into the shop, his movements guided by the faint glow of the dragon egg. Up close, he could see that the crystalline shell was covered in hairline cracks, the life inside struggling to survive in the artificial environment. Hold on, he whispered to the egg. Your sibling sent me. The egg pulsed brighter at his words, as if responding to the mention of Spark. Rex carefully lifted it from its case, surprised by how warm it felt despite its dying appearance. The moment his hands made contact, he felt something, a presence, weak but unmistakably alive. Rex! Spark's voice echoed in his mind, not heard but felt. Hurry. The dragon was right. Rex could hear voices in the corridor outside, security personnel checking on the power failure. He had maybe 3 minutes before they reached the shop. Rex made his way back to the ventilation shaft as quickly as he dared, the egg cradled against his chest. It was heavier than he'd expected, and warm in a way that seemed to seep through his clothes to his skin. As he climbed into the maintenance tunnel, he could have sworn he felt a heartbeat. Almost there, he whispered to both dragons, the one in his arms and the one waiting for him in the docking bay. Behind him, the shop's lights began to flicker back to life. The egg began to crack 3 days out from Prosperity Station hairline, fractures spreading across its crystalline surface like a spider web of light. Rex had moved it to the ship's medical bay, where he could monitor its vital signs and maintain the precise environmental conditions Spark had indicated through their strange empathic connection. "Is this normal?" Rex asked, watching as another crack appeared along the egg's curve. Should it be happening this fast? Spark pressed against his leg, purring with an intensity that made the ship's hull vibrate. The little dragon's scales were blazing with excitement, their light pulsing in rhythm with the egg's fluctuations. Through their bond, Rex could feel Spark's emotions: joy, anticipation, and underneath it all, a desperate relief that its sibling had survived. The egg pulsed brighter, and Rex could swear he saw movement inside, shadows shifting behind the translucent shell. Whatever was in there was ready to emerge. "All right," Rex said, settling down beside the makeshift nest he'd prepared. "I don't know the first thing about dragon midwifery, but I guess we're about to learn." The first real crack appeared at the egg's apex, a zigzag line that spread downward like lightning. A tiny claw emerged, no bigger than Rex's fingernail, followed by a delicate snout that pushed against the shell with determined persistence. Rex found himself holding his breath as the baby dragon worked its way free, each crack and push a victory against the forces that had nearly claimed its life. Spark sang encouragement, a melody so beautiful it brought tears to Rex's eyes. Finally, with a sound like breaking crystal, the shell gave way. The baby dragon that emerged was even smaller than Spark had been, its scales a deep emerald green that shifted to gold at the edges. It was perfect wings folded neatly against its back, eyes bright and alert, every proportion exactly as it should be. But it was also weak, trembling from the effort of hatching and the long ordeal of its imprisonment. "Hey there, little one," Rex said softly, extending his hand toward the hatchling. "Welcome to the universe." The baby dragon lifted its head at the sound of his voice, blinking in the unfamiliar light. Its eyes were the same molten gold as Spark's, but younger, more innocent. When it tried to chirp, only a tiny squeak emerged. Spark moved forward carefully, approaching its sibling with the patience of an experienced parent. The two dragons touched noses, and Rex felt a wave of emotion so intense it nearly knocked him over. Joy, relief, love, and underneath it all, the deep contentment of a family reunited. The baby dragon Rex decided to call it Ember seemed to gain strength from its sibling's presence. Its scales brightened, and it managed a proper chirp that harmonized perfectly with Spark's answering song. "Two dragons," Rex mused, watching as Spark began to groom its younger sibling with gentle licks. And if the sensor readings are right, there are at least a dozen more eggs scattered across the sector. That thought sobered him. Ember had been lucky. Rex had found it before the life inside had faded completely. But how many other eggs were sitting in private collections, slowly dying while their captors admired them as curiosities? How many had already been lost? Ember made a soft sound and struggled to stand on unsteady legs. The baby dragon was obviously hungry, and Rex quickly prepared a mixture of the high-energy nutrients that had worked so well for Spark. To his relief, the hatchling accepted the food eagerly, its strength growing with each bite. "We're going to need a bigger ship," Rex told the dragons as he watched them interact. Spark was teaching Ember how to control its bioluminescence, the two of them flickering like living stars. "And we're going to need help," The kind of help that can track down stolen eggs and get them back where they belong. Spark looked up at him with those ancient eyes, and Rex felt a complex surge of emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Trust, partnership. The dragon understood that they were in this together now, all three of them. All right, Rex said, his mind already working on the logistics. First stop is the Frontier Coalition. If we're going to mount a rescue operation for an entire species, we're going to need official backing. Ember squeaked and stumbled toward Rex, tiny claws clicking on the metal deck. The baby dragon was clearly imprinting on him, seeing Rex as another member of its family. When Rex extended his hand, Ember climbed onto his palm and curled up like a living jewel. Rex felt his heart swell with an emotion he couldn't name. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a simple mining contractor, content to work the outer rim and save enough money for a comfortable retirement. Now he was the guardian of 2 dragon hatchlings, and quite possibly the only human who understood the magnitude of what was at stake. "Don't worry, little ones," he said, feeling both dragons' attention focus on him. "We're going to find the others. All of them, I promise you that." Spark and Ember sang together, their voices weaving harmonies that seemed to fill the ship with hope. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Rex could swear he heard other voices answering, faint and distant, but unmistakably alive, not the last children of a dying race, calling out across the void for rescue. Rex Thompson had never backed down from a challenge in his life. He wasn't about to start now. 6 months later, Rex stood on the observation deck of the CNS Sanctuary, watching as the latest rescue mission returned from the outer systems. The Coalition Navy cruiser had been specially modified for Dragon Egg recovery, its cargo bays converted into nurseries, and its crew trained in xenobiological protocols that Rex had helped develop. Beside him, Spark and Ember perched on a specially designed platform, both dragons now significantly larger and more confident. Spark had grown to the size of a large dog. Its purple scales shot through with veins of silver that spoke of approaching maturity. Ember was smaller, but no less impressive, its green scales now edged with gold that caught the light like living metal. "How many this time?" Rex asked Captain Maria Santos, his former partner, who had signed on to the rescue effort after witnessing her first dragon hatching. 12 eggs, Maria replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. 3 of them were being used as decorative lights in some core world executive's office. Can you believe that? Decorative lights. Rex shook his head, though he wasn't surprised anymore. Over the past 6 months, they'd recovered 47 dragon eggs from locations ranging from private collections to black market dealers to mining operations that had no idea what they'd found. Each rescue had been a race against time, as the eggs continued to weaken without the cosmic energies they needed to develop properly. They'd saved 31 hatchlings. 16 had been too far gone when they were found. The hatchery reports are encouraging, Maria continued, calling up data on her tablet. The dragons are adapting well to the artificial environment, and Dr. Chun thinks we've finally cracked the energy frequency needed to maintain proper development. Through the observation windows, Rex could see the hatchery, a massive chamber filled with specialized incubators, each one tuned to provide the exact conditions a dragon egg needed to survive. 31 young dragons lived there now, ranging from recent hatchlings to juveniles approaching their first flight. Each one was precious beyond measure, a living piece of a puzzle they were still trying to understand. "Any word from the Deep Space Survey?" Rex asked. "They found another cluster," Maria replied. 17 confirmed signatures in the Vega system. But Rex ... She hesitated. 3 of them are on inhabited worlds, colony worlds with established governments. This is getting political. Rex nodded grimly. That was the problem they'd known would come eventually. The dragon eggs weren't just scattered through empty space. They were embedded in asteroids throughout the galaxy, many of which had been claimed by human colonies or incorporated into existing settlements. Convincing people to give up what they saw as valuable resources was proving more difficult than the actual rescues. Spark chirped softly and nuzzled Rex's hand, sensing his troubled thoughts. The dragon had become remarkably good at reading human emotions, and Rex suspected the feeling was mutual. Their bond had deepened over the months, becoming something that transcended species barriers. The Coalition Council is meeting next week, Maria said. They want a full report on the program, including projections for how many more eggs might be out there. Based on the distribution patterns we've mapped, I'd estimate somewhere between 200 and 300, Rex replied. Maybe more. Sparks. People didn't just scatter randomly. They spread across the entire spiral arm, giving their young the best possible chance of survival. It was a staggering number, and Rex knew the political implications. Finding and rescuing hundreds of dragon eggs would require resources and cooperation on a scale that challenged the entire structure of human space. Some colonies would cooperate willingly. Others would see the dragons as valuable assets to be exploited rather than living beings to be protected. But they had to try. Rex had seen what the dragons were capable of when given the chance to thrive. Spark and Ember weren't just intelligent. They were wise in ways that reminded him of ancient philosophers. Their songs could resonate through quantum fields. Their crystalline scales could process energy frequencies that human science barely understood, and their empathic abilities suggested forms of communication that transcended language itself. Importantly, they were children. Living, breathing, feeling children of a species that had sacrificed everything to ensure their young had a chance at life. There's something else, Maria said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The xenobiologists think the dragons might be ... connected. All of them. Like a quantum network that spans the entire galaxy. Rex looked down at Spark, who tilted its head with interest. Connected how? Dr. Chun's been monitoring the hatchlings. During their sleep cycles, Maria explained, their brain patterns synchronize, even when they're in separate chambers. And yesterday, when one of the juveniles had a nightmare, every dragon in the facility woke up at the same moment. Rex felt a chill run down his spine. They're not just survivors of their species. They're fragments of something larger. A collective. Consciousness, maybe. Or something we don't have words for yet. Maria shook her head. The point is, every dragon we save doesn't just represent one life. It represents part of a living network that could reshape our understanding of intelligence itself. Through the observation windows, Rex watched as a group of young dragons played together in one of the larger chambers. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, like dancers following music only they could hear. When one stumbled, the others moved to support it, without any visible communication passing between them. The Coalition needs to understand what we're dealing with, Rex said finally. These aren't just rare animals to be protected. They're the remnants of a civilization that might have spanned the galaxy before humans even discovered fire. Spark sang softly, a melody that seemed to carry harmonics from the hatchery below. Ember joined in, and then, one by one, the other. Dragons throughout the facility added their voices to the song. The sanctuary's hall began to resonate with the combined music, creating overtones that human ears could barely perceive, but that seemed to touch something deep in Rex's soul. What are they singing about? Maria asked, her voice full of wonder about Rex. Closed his eyes and let himself sink into the connection he shared with Spark. Images flowed through his mind, not memories this time, but hopes. Dreams of a future where young dragons soared between the stars, where their songs guided great ships through the void, where the crystalline cities of their ancestors rose again on worlds still waiting to be born. They're singing about tomorrow, Rex said quietly, about what they could become if we give them the chance. The song reached a crescendo that made the entire station ring like a bell, and then gradually faded to silence. But the feeling it left behind lingered, a sense of possibility so vast it took Rex's breath away. "The rescue missions continue," he said, his voice firm with renewed determination. "Every egg we save, every hatchling we protect, brings us closer to something incredible. The dragons aren't just survivors, they're the future. And my God, we're going to make sure they have one." Spark pressed against his leg, purring with contentment. Through their bond, Rex felt the dragon's absolute trust in him, its certainty that somehow, against all odds, everything would work out. Looking out at the stars beyond the observation deck, Rex allowed himself to believe it too. Somewhere out there, dozens of dragon eggs waited in the darkness, each one a precious link to a legacy that stretched back to the dawn of galactic civilization. Dot and Rex Thompson, former mining contractor turned guardian of an entire species, would find them. All, the last hatchlings of a dying race, had found their protector, and he would not let them down.